And that's criticism, baby! That part just made me, ugh. Hey there. I believe I told you guys in my last video that there's a lot going on right now on YouTube that I want to talk about, or that some things have come up that I want to talk about. So here's that. There's been a couple of things that have happened over the past week or so that really just kind of got under my skin, and I want to talk about it. And although these two situations, one involving Jeffree Star and one involving Gabbie Hanna, are very different, I do believe that both situations can fall under the category of YouTubers who can't take criticism. And also, like, YouTubers exploiting or taking advantage of their fans, depending on how you look at it. So just to jump right in, I learned from watching an Angelika Oles video about this that there was a Twitter exchange between Jeffree Star and a couple of his fans regarding this tweet where Jeffree says, "Quarantine and do our makeup, heart heart." And one of his fans replied, "Love you, but that's not social distancing, sad face." Which is something I'm sure a lot of his fans probably thought and noticed. We've talked about it before. Some of our favorite YouTubers are not properly socially distancing, and it is something that we're concerned about. Everybody's concerned about this, as they should be, or a lot of people are concerned about this, as everyone should be. And Jeffree replied to her, "Cami runs all social media for Jeffree Star Cosmetics and has been living at my house for weeks temporarily. She is all alone and her family and single mom are all in New Jersey. Please go judge someone else because you don't know what's happening in my house." Crying, laughing, kissy face. And if you're a decently nice person, you probably thought he didn't really need to go at her that harshly, or using any sort of sarcasm or defensiveness. It was a legitimate concern. The fan was wrong, it seems, but he did not need to address her that way. And it looks like another fan came to sort of defend the first fan because of the attitude that Jeffree was giving her. And the second fan said, "Okay, I'm a fan of you and support your brand, but why did you give an attitude about it? Could have simply said, 'Don't worry, she's been living with me for weeks.' They literally said they love you." I don't know, the tone might have been received wrong over Twitter, but seems kind of rude, not gonna lie. And Jeffree replied, "If you think that's an attitude, the real world is going to be very tough for you, LOL. I simply responded to someone. Sorry it's not in the exact text tone that you prefer, kissy face." And then fan number 2 responded to that with, "OMG, hey, hope you didn't take my shit as rude. Was just a thought. Anyways, keep being safe and cautious. I don't know, still love you, LMAO, heart face." And Angelika did make a really good point. She said that Jeffree Star has built an empire, but almost like a cult along with it. Because it seems as though his fans have to agree with him or have to bow down to him, or else. Angelika didn't say this, but I have an inkling that fan number 2, had she continued to argue with Jeffree after Jeffree replied to her, she may have gotten a lot of backlash from his fans. I hear that they're pretty scathing, and I might see some of them here. But it pisses me off when somebody uses a snippy or rude attitude and then gaslights, in this situation, their fans by saying that that attitude was a figment of their imagination. And here's how you know when somebody's giving you attitude after they say, "That wasn't attitude, that was your perception of what I said." Here's how you know. If you say something and you mean no harm, no sarcasm, no rudeness or anything behind what you say, and somebody misinterprets that and says to you, "Hey, like, you don't need to take an attitude with me," or "That sounded rude," most of us respond, "Oh my goodness, I'm sorry, I did not mean that to come off that way. Sorry I came off that way. That's not how I meant that." And I am sick and tired of people making these jabs, and then when they're called out for that, try to backpedal and say that it wasn't a jab, that it's the reader's fault for taking it that way. Nice people don't respond like that. Decent people don't respond like that. And in this situation, it's so disheartening because it's clear that both of these fans love Jeffree Star. The first one said, love you. And this is how he treats them. Now, I've said before on my channel that I'm not a fan of Jeffree Star, that I can still recognize when he does something good, but that overall I find him to be pretty smug, and to a degree that I don't think he deserves to be. Yes, you're rich, you've built an empire, you have amassed so many fans, but Jeffree Star doesn't realize that there are celebrities with more fame, more money, more accolades, and all of that who are decent people and treat their fans with respect. Like, seriously, if this girl pointed this out and she was just wrong, he didn't need to come at her like that. And that just shows me that on even just a small level, on the tiniest, most mild level, Jeffree Star cannot handle somebody calling him out. If I'm wrong, show me, prove it to me. But I want to move along because you guys know that I get far more fired up and passionate about my opinions about Gabbie Hanna. So the other thing that came up was she released a video where she announces her next book release. She also released her single Dandelion, which is of the same title as the second book.
Let's give Dandelion its moments. Yeah.
And I will say, I listened to the song. I thought it was really good. I think she's becoming a much, much better singer. A lot of you guys know that I am a fan of Gabbie Hanna. I don't want to say I'm a fan of all of her work. I'm a fan of her videos and some of her songs. What I'm not a fan of is how she handles interaction with other people when it's not always in her favor, or when she perceives something as an attack. Just any situation where there might be a little bit of friction. Gabbie Hanna does not take criticism, and she never owns up to her own shit. So, I hate to do this as kind of a reaction type of video, but I think it's best that I kind of just watch these clips, show them to you at the same time, and then tell you my thoughts as I was watching this video.
But the pre-order starts officially now, so you can pre-order your book, or should I say, books? Here's the dope part that was pretty unexpected, but very f***ing exciting. There are 3 different versions of this book with very different content.
Of course there are 3 different versions of this book. And of course, they're so different. I probably wouldn't think this if Gabbie didn't do this with her first book, Adultolescence, but I get the impression that Gabbie is releasing 3 different versions of this book as well as the book before it that probably aren't very different from each other, but I think she is banking on the fact that she does have so many stans out there who will spend the money on getting all 3 books. And unabashedly, she says, maybe you should get books.
Or should I say, books?
With Adultolescence, she released 3 versions. And they were the exact same book, just with different colors on the cover. So obviously, a lot of fans wanted to get every version. And I would venture to say that the fans that are going to go out and spend money on her books, especially when they're buying multiple versions of the same book, I think that these diehard fans are usually very young. So I don't know, that part seems really exploitative to me. I doubt that the 3 versions of this book are going to be so different, or else they would be different books. And it just rubs me wrong that she encourages her fans to get all of them.
Books?
But moving along, what I really want to talk about is Gabbie's inability to take criticism. And in this video, she talked about how so many people have been critical of her poetry, and particularly her last book, Adultolescence.
Yes, I'm a public figure and I put out my art publicly. By doing that, I am fully open to reviews and thus criticism. This is not new. There are people who make videos and articles tearing apart Quentin Tarantino, saying he's a terrible director. He's still one of the most famous and respected filmmakers of all time.
So now Gabbie Hanna is the Quentin Tarantino of poetry? I think a lot of people would react that way. I know that that's not what she meant, but what I do think she means by that, and I think it's something she probably tells herself, is that Quentin Tarantino, Gordon Ramsay, Ariana Grande, people who are leaders in their industry are criticized. And I think that what she takes from that is that she doesn't have to listen to the criticism. And she doesn't. She doesn't need to. But that doesn't mean that the criticisms she's receiving are not valid, especially if there's such a large group of people echoing the same sentiment.
I truly don't get upset when people make fun of my music or my poetry, because it's a matter of preference. And it's a matter of preference. And that's art! art, baby!
And I think when she doesn't have a very clear defense, she chalks it all up to this is art. Everything's subjective. If you think it's bad, that means you just don't like it. And to some degree, perhaps she's right, but that's a trump card and a cop-out. It is something she can say so that she does not have to accept any criticism. And she has said this so many times that it's clear she's not going to take your criticism no matter what.
I didn't watch a video about my book, and it's not because I can't take constructive criticism. I beg for it. I send each poem, each drawing, each demo of each song to 10 to 15 people because I'm so insecure about my work.
The truth is that part of any artist's job is to deal with criticism. In every artistic field, there are critics. There are people who talk about what's right, what's wrong with this work, or if it's good or bad. And that's criticism, baby! That part just made me, ugh.
Because at some point, I feel like people really started hiding behind the term constructive criticism while removing the constructive part and leaving only criticism. But I do take constructive criticism from people who offer constructive criticism, but I'm also not gonna sit around and spend my day clicking through videos saying I'm terrible.
So I do understand that Gabbie does not want to click on videos where people are saying outright that she's bad, that she's terrible. Honestly, I think that's a healthy approach. The problem is that she keeps saying she takes constructive criticism, and she has never, ever proven to be able to do that. One small irritation that I have with this is that she says that she can take constructive criticism, but when it's not constructive, it's just criticism, and she's said that before. Criticism is not bad. And criticism is not something that is necessarily meant to be ignored, even if it's not constructive. And what's the difference here? In my opinion, constructive criticism is criticism that tells you essentially what you can do to make your work better. Constructive criticism essentially shines light on a person's potential. And that's why it's so good to be open to it. Criticism, on the other hand, that's not constructive, it can be mean, and it can be something just as simple as this poetry is bad. And that's not exactly constructive. I mean, what do you pull from that that's going to make it better? Nothing really. It doesn't even speak to a potential. But that doesn't make that bad either. Just because criticism is criticism, and even if it's not constructive, doesn't make it mean, it doesn't make it hate, and it doesn't make it bad. It might mean that you're just bad at what you're doing. And I have a hunch that Gabbie Hanna is one of these people. And when I say one of these people, I think a lot of you know what I'm talking about when I say that the irritation I have with Gabbie Hanna in a lot of these situations is coming from a place where I can kind of identify and relate. I remember a time in my life where I acted in similar ways that Gabbie has acted. I remember being at a point in my life where I could not take criticism or that it would break me down. I know that there are still some knee-jerk reactions in me to act and feel the way Gabbie does in situations, and I think that's where a lot of us get so freaking annoyed with her, is that a lot of us have the same, like I said, knee-jerk reactions, but we do the work to behave differently than what that instinct tells us. Because that instinct is wrong. We know that that instinct comes from a place of damage, of hurt, of insecurity, essentially from a place that is not truthful. And we know that handling things like criticism or constructive criticism, being told that you're not perfect at everything, it takes a little work. It takes a little bit of work to look into yourself and to be able to admit that maybe somebody else is right. That, I believe, is primarily where my frustrations with Gabbie Hanna lie. This is kind of a side note, but I do think it's related to the overall point I'm trying to make here, which is essentially Gabbie Hanna has to be perfect at everything all the time. So I praised her when she did an apology video towards the family of Bianca Devins for her TikTok e-girl video. I praised her for that, and somebody in my comments made a really, really good point. They said something along the lines of, I think that Gabbie has only apologized for this situation because it was legitimately a mistake. And I thought that that makes so much sense. When you are a proud person, when apologizing is difficult for you, when your ego and pride get in the way of a lot of things, which is, I have to admit, something I've had to work on over the years, so it's something I understand. When those things get in the way, it makes it really difficult to apologize. It makes it really difficult to admit when you're wrong. But when you do something that is completely by accident and it hurts someone else, it's a lot easier to apologize. If you're on your phone texting and you bump into somebody on the sidewalk and you know that was purely your mistake, but of course you didn't mean to, hurt somebody else or inconvenience them, it's really easy to be like, oh, I'm so sorry, my mistake, right? That's easy stuff. What we haven't seen from Gabbie is an ability to apologize or to take criticism when it comes to the topic of her own choices and behavior and character. So bringing this back to the concept of Gabbie being perfect at everything all the time, it seemed to me when she came on the scene, she wanted to be seen as a comedian. She goes on and on about Bo Burnham and Louis C.K. and Mitch Hedberg and other comedians that she's liked and taken inspiration from. And she would speak about comedy as if she were some sort of comedy expert. And I think she's come to realize that she's not a comedian. And then for a while there, and I think she's still kind of doing it, talked about being like some sort of a rap expert. Like, she can freestyle and she's so into rap world drama and stuff like that. And that... I don't know. It's just something that it always seems weird when she talks about it. We've seen the way she's snapped at Irene in her podcast when they talk about music, because Gabbie seems to be some sort of expert when it comes to anything in the music industry.
Right?
I mean, I love Lizzo so much. And I think that I think her rise is like, it's tough because like hers was more of like an explosion.
No, Lizzo's?
Yeah, dude.
Nah.
Really?
I say that's
think
a hard
so.
no. Lizzo's been at it forever.
No,
I remember...
I'm saying she like popped off and people started recognizing how great she was this year. I
don't think that's true, because her first big hit was like 4 years ago.
Which one was that?
I do my hair
Good as hell.
check.
Well, but I'm saying it was not nearly as big as Truth Hurts was, even though Truth Hurts came out.
No, but that's why
before.
I'm saying what you're saying isn't true.
And also, here we see it in terms of poetry. Gabbie sees herself as some sort of expert when it comes to poetry. And you can argue that she doesn't think she's an expert, but if she's telling all of her critics that they're in the wrong for thinking what they think, she has to think she's an expert. She has to.
It's a very misunderstood book, and I'll get to that. But I admit, I looked through it, and a lot of the pages feel rushed, because they were. And it's also full of a lot of insecurity.
So she told us that her first book was rushed and full of insecurity, but let's really focus on the part where she says it was rushed. This has come up before. People have said, like, there are a lot of pages here that are essentially blank. These poems probably average like 7 words each. That's not factual information. I'm just saying that it does not seem like she really put much into this book. And she's kind of confirmed that for us. So for someone to say that the work is not good, how can you confirm that you didn't put the proper time into this, but still hang on to this notion that it's good? I don't get it. I do get it. It's pride and ego, of course. We've made that clear.
But it was marketed as a Shel Silverstein parody. And that is the one place I do care to defend adultolescence. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Shel Silverstein, he is a children's book writer who also wrote in a bunch of really heavy, dark shit amongst his silliness.
Okay, this needs to stop. For one, everybody knows who Shel Silverstein is. He is one of my favorite authors, and I bet a lot of you love his work. I keep hearing this comparison to Shel Silverstein, and Gabbie is the only person who makes that comparison. But if your work is so much like Shel Silverstein's, then why isn't Shel Silverstein receiving the same kind of criticism that you receive? His work is good, it's beautiful, it's complex. It is very clear that his poems can be read on 2 different levels, if not more. His poems are also very long. Not all of them, but a lot of them are much longer, have really good rhythm, really interesting use of words, and can be read as kind of like nursery rhymes, or can be kind of dissected and really, really dove into. But it's like, honey, you're not Shel Silverstein. You're not. I'm not saying you'll never be that good, but right now, and certainly with adultolescence, nowhere near. Just because you are trying to do the same thing, the same concept, does not make your work good. And it does not mean that people are mistaking your work. She's made it clear to us that these poems are deeper than what they look like on surface level. Okay, cool.
This book was very adult themes written from the lens of a child, or written through the lens of children's poems. I'm talking about very adult feelings like depression, anxiety, mental health, eating disorders, assault, and abuse the way a child would, or in a way that is easier for a child to understand. There might be a silly poem about sleeping and dreaming, but it's really about laying in bed and wishing that you were dead, if you read between the lines.
So she has said this several times, that she is talking about very deep, heavy adult concepts in a very light and playful way, which I think is a great concept. And she's told us that so many times that I have made it a point when I read any of her poems, because they do pop up on YouTube when people critique her work, I try to see if I can find that deeper meaning in her poems. I'm gonna get to that in a little bit though.
But beyond all this, I guess my one thing that I would ask of you guys as readers is please just read it the way it's meant to be read, which is a light, enjoyable, digestible read.
And here, this makes no sense. We've heard her tell us so many times that this work is so much deeper than it looks. I don't remember what interview it was, but she did tell somebody that she thinks people who are critical of her poetry are only reading her poetry at a surface level. But then here, she tells us to please just read it as surface level poetry. It's light, it's playful. Don't take it so seriously. So what am I supposed to do? Because when we look at it in a very shallow way and just look at it for what it looks like, it looks bad. And then you ask us not to do that. You tell us to go deeper. And for a lot of us, when we find that deeper meaning, usually when you spell it out for us, or when we try to find it ourselves, it still doesn't make it good.
People aren't scrambling very often to read the Iliad or the Odyssey. They're great works, but it's not what people want to sit down and read. I assume, if it's anything like when I was in school, most students aren't jumping for joy when they're assigned Shakespeare. But people are really into books like Milk and Honey. Poetry, like YouTube and music and everything else, evolves. You have to evolve with it. That's why Vine was so popular, because it was short, easily digestible, 6 seconds at a time. So I wrote short, easily digestible, relatable poems that people want to read and what I want to write.
Now, don't get me wrong. I love Vine. Sometimes when I want to be in a good mood, I will put on Vine compilations that I've seen a million times already. I love Vine. But the fact that Gabbie is comparing Vine to Shakespeare, the Iliad, the Odyssey, and drawing a parallel essentially between Vine and her poetry, there's just so much wrong with that. Sure, Gabbie, your poetry can be seen as akin to certain Vine videos, but I would venture to say they're not good Vines, if that's what we're comparing it to. And to say that it's short, easy, digestible, and all of that as a defense for the quality of the poetry, I think you really kind of shot yourself in the foot there, because what you're comparing your work to some of the best literature that's ever been written, and essentially saying that your poetry is the McDonald's version of that. And I don't even know if it's fair to say that about it. This analogy was just not there. There was nothing there, I think, that really supported her case at all. But going back to how we should read her poems, whether we should look at just the surface or go deeper and read between the lines, I still have not figured out which one she wants us to do. However, before, when I've heard her say there's deeper meaning, you've got to read between the lines, I tried to do that, and I actually tried to do that with, I think, the poem that most critics used as an example for proof that her poetry is bad. She talks about this poem, time is relative, beauty is relative, family is relatives. And on the surface, that sounds kind of dumb. Sorry to use such a negative word, but there's nothing compelling about that. Even on a surface level, there's nothing fun or playful about that. So I've tried to look into that and say, well, what could she be trying to say? And we know that Gabbie does not, or has not always had, good relationships with her family members. So I kind of looked into this and thought perhaps she's saying that time is relative, that's something we hear a lot, and beauty is relative, and kind of using the play on words that family is relatives, which sounds awkward, but technically is correct. I kind of took that to mean that essentially that family is also relative in the way that time and beauty are. That family can be whoever you want it to be, that just because you're related to someone doesn't necessarily mean that they are your family, or that you have to look at them as such. So here I am looking for the deeper meaning in this poem, and then she says,
and some are just fun. I saw the one, time is relative, beauty is relative, family is relative. Somebody write, you guys are really out here supporting Gabbie Hanna when she wrote this in all seriousness. I didn't write in all seriousness. I wrote it as a joke.
She wrote it as a joke. I can't keep up with this. I can't keep up with this. I'm trying. I try with Gabbie, I really do. This isn't it. And same with this next one. This poem, link in bio.
Poem that I've seen shared around called Link. The title of the poem is Link, the poem is in bio. So when you read the title and the poem together, it is Link in bio. It's not meant to be taken that seriously in a lot of places. It's a parody of a children's poetry book.
I don't think anybody took that seriously. I think that was the point of the criticism, is that it's bad. That there's nothing to it. There is nothing to that poem. Which is why it's bad. And if you were to listen to criticism and hear us say, this is bad, if you knew how to take criticism, and in this case, criticism that's not overtly constructive, you would at least know to leave that page out of the book. But you needed to fill up those pages, so that's why it's there, and you know that. And when I say you, I mean Gabbie Hanna, but you also probably know that too. It's bad. Nobody's taking it too seriously, and then when we don't take it too seriously, you're telling us that we're not taking it seriously enough. So that just tells me that it's just bad, and everything that you're saying really supports that idea that it's bad. And I will say, though, that these poems seem more like analogies, and I don't think that inherently they are stupid. I think a lot of them are actually pretty clever. When she talks about a baby bird falling out of its nest and that being a metaphor for choosing to die as the only way out of your situation as a child. Or let's pretend that family as relatives was meant to be taken the way I tried to take it. I think that these concepts are kind of clever, but they're more like a collection of just clever thoughts. Like they're tweets, or what I call shower thoughts. Things that just quick little bursts of clever analogies. And I think that she's a smart girl and she probably has a lot of those. And I'll just go ahead and say, I'm a smart girl, I have a lot of those. Never would I write each thought onto a different page, create a book, and push out 3 different versions of that book and tell you that you should buy it.
The only thing that obviously really hurt about all of this is, being ridiculed by your peers obviously isn't a fun feeling. I'm not gonna pretend like it doesn't bother me in that aspect. I just miss the old YouTube community a lot. I remember joining in the first place because I've never been good at talking to people in real life or making friends. So ever since AIM and MySpace, I've made my friends online instead of in person. And I remember a time on YouTube when I used to watch that creators used to support each other and celebrate each other's successes and projects. And I thought, wow, that seems like a really great community to be a part of, and I wish I could be a part of that.
And here's another example of Gabbie gaslighting the entire YouTube community. There's a lot that can be said about just this clip alone. I could look at that and just say, Gabbie, maybe if you hadn't burned so many bridges, you'd see a lot more support. Or perhaps your peers would support you more if you put out better quality work. It is not an inherent badness in the YouTube community, particularly your peers. You're essentially saying that your peers are not as good and uplifting as they used to be. And I don't think that's true at all. I think that they used to support you until they saw your true colors. And that's when you lost the support of your friends, and we see you cycle through friends. And so you start off getting a lot of support and then you end up losing that support. And the common denominator is Gabbie Hanna. So my advice to Gabbie, there's so much advice that I would give to Gabbie, but in this particular situation, or just in regards to this clip, I would say to look at the common denominator and just entertain the idea for a couple minutes that your behavior may be the problem, that it might not be everybody else, that maybe it's you. In a broader sense, if we're talking about why you don't make friends, we're talking about why you lose friends and why you don't have the support of the YouTube community when you do these projects. Or in a more specific sense, perhaps your poetry is not very good and that's why nobody's supporting you. And a couple things I forgot to mention earlier, Gabbie told us that she accepts constructive criticism by putting her work out and showing it to, first she says 10 or 15 people and then admits that it's closer to 5 people.
I send each poem, each drawing, each demo of each song to 10 to 15 people.
And that's her proof for how open she is to constructive criticism. No, you're not. Especially because if you choose only a small handful of people to listen to, you're choosing those people. So they're more likely to say things that are going to make you feel good. And while I am learning on my own that it is a good practice to surround yourself with more positivity than negativity if you are going to put your life on the internet, just for the sake of one's own mental health. I'm learning, you guys. When you're talking about constructive criticism, particularly with artwork, writing, music, etc., I think it's really important not to put yourself in an echo chamber, or else that work might come out and look bad, sound bad, feel bad. And it really seems like that's what she's done. And the other thing I wanted to say, and I probably alluded to this a little bit, but I've talked a little bit on my channel here recently about how difficult it must be for a YouTuber to get an accurate perception of how much support they have versus criticism, how much people love them versus hating them. And I think that with some of these YouTubers, and Gabbie Hanna is a perfect example, I think that some of them get an inaccurate perception of how good their artwork is when they decide to do something outside of just YouTube content, when they decide to make music or write books. I think it's too easy for them to see these really inflated high numbers in terms of like sales and stuff like that. They see these high numbers as high level of support for their work, and instead of attributing that to the fact that they just have a very large fan base that will buy their work because they want to support that creator, I don't think YouTubers like Gabbie Hanna are keeping in mind that it's that fan base that are inflating those numbers, not the quality of the work. And I feel like, yeah, that's got to be a difficult concept to take in, but it's true. So sure, Adultolescence was on the #1 bestseller list for some time, but I fully believe that is because Gabbie Hanna has a large fan base and that it had so little to do with the quality of the work. And like I said, she is clever. She is smart.
You is smart, you is kind, you is important.
We've seen her eventually learn how to take criticism, or a little bit when it comes to her music. I believe that guy, Tristan, the one who reacts to a lot of YouTubers' music and talks about the quality of their singing. I forgot his last name, but his first name is Tristan. I believe when he initially criticized her singing, she had a hard time taking that and just kind of brushed him off. And then I believe later she collabed with him and learned how to use her voice better. And her music got significantly better. This most recent release, Dandelion, I really loved her vocals on it. Of course, I'm not an expert, but it sounded great to me, whereas I can look at other songs and say, like, this sounds like shit, guys. Or it's just not great. I don't know. I don't know exactly where I stand with a majority of her music. But the point is that that is like probably the one time that I've noticed that Gabbie has taken constructive criticism and it has actually built her up in some way. So if she were to be more open to this criticism, perhaps she could be a good poet. Perhaps her writing and poetry could go more along the lines of something like Shel Silverstein. Or perhaps poetry is not really where it's at for her. She talks about a lot of deep-rooted stuff and serious and heavy stuff that is deep within her that she hasn't shared yet, and that's why this poetry is so personal and meaningful to her. Perhaps she needs to write a memoir. She has a way with words. She is smart. She is complex. There's potential there. But by ignoring the criticism, she's not going to get better at her work. And as you guys know, I could talk for hours about Gabbie Hanna and ways I think she can improve. What upsets me is that I am not the only person on the internet that is giving her feedback in this manner. She says that she is open to constructive criticism as long as it is not like belittling or mean or essentially not constructive. But here I am providing constructive criticism. And yes, my channel's small, so that might be a reason she never gets my message. But like I said, I'm not the only person who thinks like this. I'm not the only person who speaks to her like this. And she still brushes all of those voices off. So no, Gabbie, you've proved to us that you cannot take constructive criticism. You can't. You have once, after giving Tristan some pushback. So maybe it's inaccurate to say that you can't, but you won't. And that's the bottom line. So to give you guys a quick update about what's going on with me since my last video, I did say in the very beginning of that video that I wanted to make that, create it, put it up so that I could move on with my channel and continue to make the content that I want to make. And here I am. After the weekend, I am back to making the content I came here to make. I do not want you guys to express concern for me in a way that I'm telling you isn't warranted. I think those of you who are supportive of me have every right, and you guys are so caring to be concerned about me when you are. But I am telling you, there are times like now that I am creating a video and it's good for me. This feels good. I have been anxious, very, very anxious for the past couple of days, and it is in moments like this where I don't feel my anxiety. I've mentioned my Patreon and how positive that's been for me as well. So I don't want you to think that by creating videos I am exhausting myself or damaging my mental health. I do a really good job of putting systems in place to take care of myself. And I think it's funny that I wanted to talk about criticism and how well or poorly some of these YouTubers take it. I hope you guys recognize in me that I am somebody who can take your criticism, constructive or not. Maybe I've been doing it too much. I think some of you have voiced that. What I think I'm going to work on the most for now, and a lot of you may already know this, but I think I'm going to be backing off from my comment section a lot more, at least for a period of time. We've talked about how the comment section really isn't an accurate reflection of how most people view my videos. Most people view any videos, really. So I want to do my best to accept the positivity from you guys rather than put energy and focus on the little bit of negative that's out there. And one way that I can do that for now is backing off from the comment section. I'll still, check them out here and there, probably look at them for the first, say, hour of an upload or so. And if I'm feeling like I'm in a good, strong place, I may check out the comments here and there. But I have been overwhelmed. I do need to back off from those. If I don't respond to all of your DMs, I'm sorry, but I'm getting to a point now where that can be overwhelming if I don't put boundaries around it. So I thank you guys so much for all of the messages you've sent me before and after my last video. You guys are so smart and have taught me so much. And I'm smart, so that's telling you something. So I'm gonna take you guys' advice. I am gonna take care of myself. I am taking care of myself. And I am going to back away from anything that might put my mental health at risk. I know you guys already understand that. I know you guys already support that, but I think it was worth acknowledging outwardly so that you don't think like, hey, is this something she should be doing, or does she know that she had that little like issue over the weekend? No, I'm well aware of what all is going on and ways that I can improve not only my work, my content, but also my well-being. So that's what I'm going to focus on. There's one person out there that is watching to this point. To you, thank you for coming back. Thank you for watching to this point. And I may or may not see you in the comments. All right, bye.